Kia ora and welcome to Sector Report. This week we step away from the practical side of farming and call on a scientific research establishment near Mosgiel, Agresearch's sizable campus at Invermay. We catch up with some of the leading edge research they're doing at Invermay, including animal genomics, and discover the Crown Research Institute is turning its work into a money earner. We meet the scientist who's leading a project to deal with the very troublesome clover root weevil. And with more and more deer farmers moving from the flats into the hills, we look at work being done on the impact of farmed deer on the South Island high country. Plus, meet the scientist working to bring greenhouse gas emissions under control. In a paddock at Invermay, he demonstrates how he samples the air above pasture to measure the greenhouse gas nitrous oxide, a major contributor to our emissions. Later, I talk to the man who oversees much of the work at Invermay, Dr. Jimmy Sutty. But first, we're on the trail of the clover root weevil. The Invermay campus sits in leafy splendour on the edge of Mosgiel near Dunedin. Its staff of about 300 scientists and support staff concentrate on several research areas, chief among them the burgeoning science of genomics, deer and sheep production, greenhouse gas emissions and biosecurity. Colin Ferguson is an Invermay Agresearch entomologist, an insect man, who's been doing a great deal of work on one of the biggest pests in our pastoral production, the clover root weevil. Colin explained the significance of this insect pest for farmers and what he hopes will be a breakthrough with the introduction of this wasp, a harmless import which has a healthy appetite for the weevil.
Very, very significant. It's probably New Zealand's worst pasture pest. Math have estimated that if we leave it untreated, it would cost the country somewhere between $200 million and $1 billion per year in lost earnings, so right. Significant pest.
Do they show any particular preference for the type of clover they attack?
It feeds on a lot of different clovers, but it's got a very strong preference for white clover.
What feedback are you getting from farmers?
They're very worried. We've seen what it's done up in the North Island, and now the weevil's spreading through the South Island. Farmers are noticing it in their pastures, and they're very concerned about what it's going to do.
So what is the work you're doing here then?
We're trying to find out exactly where the clover root weevil is in Otago and Southland, and when we find it in reasonable populations, we're looking to introduce a biological control agent, a small parasitic wasp, to try and control the weevil, stop it becoming as big a pest as it has up in the North Island.
A wasp, though, surely a lot of New Zealanders will go, gosh, they're a real pest. We don't need any more types of wasps in this country. Well,
this one's very small. It's only 2 or 3 millimetres long, and it's very, very specific. It doesn't sting people. It won't bother people at all. What it does is it lays its eggs inside the weevil, and those eggs hatch, turn into a larvae which feeds inside the weevil for about 3 weeks. Eventually they burst out of the weevil, killing it, and they pupate in the soil before they emerge as wasps again and go off and look for more weevils. But not only do they kill the wasp, as soon as they lay the egg inside it, the weevil becomes sterilised and it won't lay any more eggs.
In his lab, Colin Ferguson has pasture samples showing how much damage the clover root weevil can do to pasture above ground, let alone what it does under it.
The adults feed on the clover leaves, and you can see that quite easily if you look at the leaves in an infested pasture. You'll see regular notching around the outside of the leaves. If you've got a lot of weevils there, it looks like it's been blasted by a shotgun. The adults, or rather the larvae, feed on the roots and the root nodules underneath the soil, and they're the most damaging stage. So they prevent the clover fixing nitrogen. That means the pasture becomes deficient in nitrogen. Farmers have to add extra nitrogen to compensate for what the weevils are doing. What
sort of controls have been available up until this parasite that you're looking at?
Well, virtually none. The weevils are very hard to kill by insecticides. We can kill the adults, but they reinvade a pasture very, very quickly, even if you do spray them. And the larvae in the soil are very difficult to get to with an insecticide. So really farmers don't have an insecticide option. They can use management techniques, and that's really putting on more nitrogen. It's going to cost them a lot of money. Some farmers up in the North Island have had to put on an extra 150 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare just to compensate for what the weevil's doing. So that's a significant cost to them. Other than that, farmers can try and manage their clover a little bit better, not push it as hard as they might otherwise. But really, until this wasp was introduced to the country, they haven't had much to control it with.
Across the way from Colin Ferguson and his weevils is a building housing expert and a cutting edge of the biological sciences, genomics. Rosemary Rickman runs the commercial side of Agresearch's work in this area. She explains how the CRI makes money from its scientific endeavours.
Essentially what we do is whatever our clever researchers are able to put out, we try and commercialise into a very robust and economical test that can actually go out to the local industries as required. We help farmers with market-assisted selection and developing breeding programs, and that ranges from anything from salmon farming to sheep farming, deer farming, whatever species you name it, we try and do it. A lot of our commercial work comes from published data, so there's no IP involved, and we're able to get it out.
Aquaculture is one area where InverMay's Genomics and Reproduction Centre is doing quite a bit of work, particularly in identifying salmon families with the best genetic traits.
Basically, we have to extract DNA from the salmon, initially from their parents, which then goes onto our big, large DNA database. And from there, we would then genotype their progeny and relate them back to the parents so that the breeding programs can actually establish families to breed with, and they would then select the families which actually breed the salmon that they would like with the various traits. And
so what are those traits?
Rapid growing would be one of the biggest ones, sometimes fat content, colour, pink and not white salmon, so various different traits along those lines. It's all very individual, depending on the contract that we have with the actual farmers or companies.
Scientists analyse samples for clients at $20 a sample, and in the past year, this sort of work has pulled in $2 million. Some of their most successful commercialisations have been in the plant world. For instance, work on pine trees for the Forestry Crown Research Institute, Scion.
What we're doing there is identifying panels of SNPs, which we spoke about just now. So we're looking at about 30 to 40 SNPs at a time in a particular sample. And then we supply that result to the actual client, and then they will relate it back to any traits that they would like. So if they're looking at the density of a tree or the straightness of a tree, they would then pick up the SNPs that would be related to that trait.
Rosemary Rickman says there's also a healthy income stream from clients all around the world wanting genetic samples analysed. Beef and Lamb and Agresearch, using government subsidies, have set up a company called Ovita that will sell DNA information to a drug company. It works with Pfizer, which usually has first right of refusal.
In Ovita we have a research money to invest. In the way that we decide what traits that we're going to look at, we went through a traits prioritisation process where we took a list of 50 sheep traits that were out in the industry of interest, and we ranked them on an economic scale of value to the farmer, like of what sort of
traits?
Well, this is things like parasites, disease, facial eczema, there's wool weight, carcass weight, number of lambs born, reproduction traits, all the sorts of things that affect the sheep industry. And so having an economic ranking of these traits enables us to make sort of clear and transparent research investment decisions. So with that sort of information on what traits are of value, those are the ones that we invest our money, the Ovita money, into. And the bulk of the work from the genomic side is done out at InverMay here.
Eleanor Lynn Scott there, explaining how her company is commercialising the genomics research done at InverMay. I'll be back in a moment with Dr. Jimmy Sutty, Agresearch's General Manager of Applied Technology at InverMay. Well, Jimmy Sutty, welcome to the Sector Report here on Country 99 TV. Now, as we've just seen with my field report on a couple of your projects at InverMay, and there's more to come later in the program, you're very busy down there. If you were to characterise InverMay's work, What sets it apart from other Agresearch establishments, say like Ruakura? What are your emphases?
I guess the first point is that we consider ourselves to be one Agresearch,
right,
and that there are 4 campuses, of course Ruakura, Grasslands, Lincoln and Invermay, and we tend to think across the spectrum, and we tend to be doing work across the spectrum and from the one Agresearch concept for delivery to the farming industries.
Although I did get the impression though that with the genomics research that you're tending to go towards the genetic way.
I would say there are 4 centres of research that we have at Invermay, or perhaps a 5th. One is in the genomics area, which really we are the country's ovine, to some extent cervine, and 1 or 2 other genotype centres down there. Deer systems is important, and greenhouse gas work, particularly with nitrous oxide, a little bit of biocontrol work with insects, and of course we've got the bioinformatics, the mathematician types down there supporting the genomic initiatives.
Indeed. When I came away, my head was hurting after talking to those people. Now,
I'm not too sorry about that.
I'm sure you're not. Now, research requires money.
Yes.
So how is funding working under the new Ministry of Science and Innovation, which it's replaced various funding
Of course,
bodies?
we've had a major change. The CRI task force announced the results. About a
CRI,
Crown Research Institute.
Right.
There are currently 8 Crown Research Institutes, of which Agresearch is one of the largest. Agresearch being involved, of course, with pastoral agriculture. And the CRI task force met under Neville Jordan, who was the chair of that, and they recommended to the government a series of changes to take place. And one of the key changes was that CRI should have core funding, because the CRIs have core purpose. We spent last winter negotiating a core purpose for all the CRIs. So we have a core purpose statement, which essentially sets us apart from all of the other CRIs. And the CRI task force actually said, look, the CRIs need a corpus of money to be able to enable them to conduct their core purpose. Therefore, we will change the system so that the CRIs will obtain some of their government investment as a single core funding event, rather than having to compete for everything. Can't say too much about the way, how much that is or anything like that, because that'll be coming out in the budget. However, the fact that Agresearch, and as with the other CRIs, has now got a pool of money that we will be making the investment decisions with, it becomes very, very important. The critical thing there is that the CRIs won't be making these decisions themselves. It'll be very, very important that our core purpose is to work with the farming sectors to add value and profitability to our sector. Therefore, we will be very closely partnering with the major entities within our sector and basically using our core funding to work with their strategies and develop up their strategies with ours, so that we can actually deliver the value and the impact that we've been requested to do by the government.
So in other words, a streamlining of the process, I guess.
That's correct.
Now, is there effectively now a greater amount of taxpayer funding available?
Sadly, no. What they've done is they've mapped in a lot of the contracts that we already had from our original comparative situation. So the actual corpus of money stays the same. What has changed is the way in which we obtain it and the way in which we will go ahead, of course, and invest it with our partners.
There is an increasing emphasis. You talk of investment and you know, it's getting quite corporate for science in a way. There is this increasing emphasis on commercialising the results of your research. Just very briefly, how does that work? How do you turn a piece of pure research discovery into a commercial benefit?
There's several ways of doing that. Clearly, one way is taking a piece of research and licensing it to an entity who will then pick it up, commercialise it and take it out. Another way is simply to use a technology transfer system, a technique or a system, which we would then partner up with an entity It could be Beef and Lamb New Zealand, it could be the Sheep and Beef Council, where we'd actually go out and actually transfer the technology. You know, perhaps a lot of the deer stuff that we've done over the years has been in that particular area there.
Right.
We would very, very seldom in Agresearch do that sort of thing ourselves. We would either have a commercialisation event, a sale, royalty, or a licence, or else we'll partner with someone to deliver technologies more directly to farmers.
Now, can we just go to the primary growth partnerships which the national-led government has set up? What PGP projects has Agresearch got underway, particularly at your neck of the woods in Invermay?
Currently, we don't have any that are actually underway. We're in the final stage of contracting, a fair number actually. And the one I'll talk about, which is directly related to some of the activities at Invermay, is Farm IQ. Now, Farm IQ is now PGG Wrights and Silverfound Farms and Landcorp.
Oh, yeah.
And they're very interested in the meat supply chain. And the piece that we'll be doing predominantly down at Invermay is around genomics. Because quite clearly, if we're going to be looking for the optimal sheep, as it were, for the consumer market, wherever that consumer market is, UK, Asia, then to be able to use genomics to actually find the right sheep that will deliver to that market essentially requires a genomics solution which leverages directly from some of the activities that are going on at Invermay. So this is a clear piece of work where we will be contributing to Farm IQ from our knowledge of genomics vested largely at Invermay.
Now, global warming, of course, is the issue du jour. Shortly we'll be seeing my field report on work at Invermay on nitrous oxide emissions from the soil. But what else has Agresearch got going in that area?
We have a huge methane program.
Oh, yeah.
And that's largely in, but not exclusively, in Palmerston North at the Grasslands Centre.
Right.
And typically, this is looking at emissions, methane emissions from the animal, learning more about it and trying to be able to develop mitigation practices. A lot of the people down there are working with the rumen, where of course the methane comes from. Looking at the rumen microorganisms that are there. We're also very interested in the genetics because, interestingly enough, there are some animals that are low emitters and some animals that are high emitters. And in fact, this ties back to Invermay because there's quite a bit of work going on around trying to identify the genetic causes, as it were, of the high and the low emitters. And then, of course, we're interested in modelling the rumen as well and trying to look at mitigation systems where we can actually prevent methane or mitigate it. And I guess finally, there's a whole lot of research on measurements of methane and trying to improve systems to measure methane. As you can imagine, a gas is actually quite hard to measure accurately.
It would be.
It's pretty important that we actually get the techniques in place. So I guess nitrous oxide and methane would be the two major areas that we're involved with.
Dr. Jimmy Sutty there. Next up, we'll take a look at work on the impact of farmed deer on the South Island high country and a project to find out how much of the greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, is escaping from our soil and into the atmosphere. The Farm Systems Group at Invermay has a whole range of projects underway, and one we checked out with scientist Andrew Wall is research into the impact farmed deer, not those in the wild, are having on the South Island's fragile high country.
One of the main projects that we're doing here in the Farm Systems team is we've been tracking red deer in the high country, South Island high country. We've been trying to find out how they're using the environment up there and what impact they're also having on the environment up there. There is concern that deer may have a negative impact on the high country, but what we're trying to find out is what impact they are having and also if we can increase their productivity up there as well. The country that we're working in is very, very large tussock grassland paddocks, and they've got quite a diversity of topography and vegetation within them. So observing the hinds would be very difficult. So what we're doing is we've been tracking them with GPS units. And we've also been mapping these paddocks using satellite imagery or aerial photography, and mapping the vegetation in these paddocks, and then relating the habitat use of the hinds to these vegetation maps and topographical maps. We've carried out work at 2 high country farms so far, one down in Te Anau and the other one in South Canterbury. And the main findings we've found is that the deer are preferentially grazing the pastoral areas of the paddocks. It's oversown grass that's introduced normal pasture species and legumes. But there's also quite a component of tussock in there, and also scrub and matagauri. And we've found that they're mainly using the pasture areas, but they do use the tussocks at certain times of the year, such as during calving. But surprising, they're not using the scrub areas as much as we thought they would.
Deer are flighty creatures at the best of times, so how do the scientists get these fairly weighty GPS units with their collars around the animals' necks?
These deer are farmed animals, so they're put under normal farm management practices. So they're brought in at a reasonable frequency, and they're brought in at certain key times of the year. So just before mating and just before calving. So normally they're brought in and they're yarded and they're put into a crush, and so we can just work in with the normal farm management and put the collars on.
This is the GPS collars?
Yes, GPS collars.
Andrew's project on the impact of deer farming on the high country is a data gathering operation. They're still a little way from drawing any conclusions yet.
At the moment, we're really gaining some baseline data for the project, and so yes, we've worked out the habitats that they've been using, and with continual monitoring of the paddocks, we will look to see how they are changing the vegetation over time, and if they're having any negative impacts on that environment.
Too early to say yet, though?
Too early to say on that side of it, yes.
Across the road from the Invermay campus, in a corner of a paddock, scientist Dr. Tony van der Weerden is busy making his contribution in conjunction with Lincoln University scientists to climate change research. Tony's mission: to measure nitrous oxide emissions from nitrate-rich soil made that way mainly by animal urine.
Nitrous oxide is it's a gas that happens to be a greenhouse gas. So it has the ability to warm the atmosphere. It's released by soils. The soils are the main source of nitrous oxide. There's bacteria in the soil that release nitrous oxide as part of their survival in terms of how they live and exist in the soil. When they convert ammonium to nitrate, there's a release of nitrous oxide there under certain conditions, and then that's called nitrification.
In the paddock next to the caravan are manually operated caps on the grass which capture air containing nitrous oxide emissions. The air sample is captured with a syringe and stored in a code-labelled vial, which is sent off to the lab for analysis. There are thousands of samples. Next door is a set of automatically controlled sealed boxes which take samples to measure nitrous oxide without any human intervention. Tony talked me through the system.
Basically, just like with the manual one, we had a closed system, and taking a headspace sample from a closed system.
Yeah.
These lids will come across, and once it's closed,
yep,
we have another closed system. And instead of using a syringe to take a sample and putting it in a vial,
yep,
we have air lines here that are pumping out. One pumps out and the other pumps in, so it circulates the air in here, and the sample, the headspace sample, will go to the caravan
over
here. Has
and hence this big tangle of hoses here, which is what's taking the air over to the caravan.
Yep.
Shall we whip over and have a look at the caravan?
Yeah, sure.
And just see what secrets you've got hidden in there.
Right.
So samples are going in through those hoses.
That's
down
right.
the side.
Through the hoses and through these. These are Teflon tubes. So one's going in and one's going out.
Right.
So it's a closed system.
So what's inside this Pandora's box here,
rightio,
Tony?
So we've got a number of things in here. We've got the air lines coming through, which go into a manifold here, so that the software that's been developed will switch from one chamber to the next, and as one chamber is selected, that particular chamber is being analysed, the headspace is being analysed, and the air line will go up through a CO2, a carbon dioxide filter, and through to this photoacoustic trace gas analyzer here.
All the nitrous oxide data is fed back to a secure website at Invermay and provides an instant glimpse into what's happening in that paddock. At this stage, this is an exercise in data collection. The next practical step is to determine how to control those emissions. All just part of the enormous amount of research being done by scientists around the country as they work to overcome the challenge of greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture. Dr. Tony van der Weerden there, explaining the sophisticated methods being used to measure the release from soil of one of our most problematic greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide. Well, that's our show. I'll be back soon with another edition of Sector Report. Remember, you can check out the program on our website. Catch you next time.